Okay, well, I have worked up my drafts for my purple alien, and I used my 15 peg Cindy wood loom to do my draft. So I'm doing a smaller one, and then I'm going to double the size of my finished draft that I'm happy with. And for the most part, I'm happy with my completed draft. And there's just probably very few little touches that I would change. So when doing this originally, I had planned on doing the head vertically and using a wrap and turn technique for the chin and nose. That was my original plan. Now, my initial thought before I even did this was to actually do it like the body of a turtle. As you can see, this was my original, very first made up head. It's too long and narrow, and it didn't really work. So I had to go in and try again and go with my original gut instinct and do the turtle's body as the head and change the color. This was my second head. And as you can see, it looks like a bird's head. The eye area worked fine, but the nose needed help. But I did a flatten it here and then E-wrapped, and I figured I needed more space here to make that area wider. So I chose to go in and E-wrap the bottom, which led me to this, and change the color when necessary. But basically I ended up sewing the back half and hiding my blue. So I've made my head a lot easier than it was in many ways. So I went in and simplified the head, which I found was the best way was to go with the turtle's head. So in certain cases, don't be afraid to think outside the box when it comes to creating a pattern. My initial thought was that looks like the shape, the basic shape. When you take the ears out, it looks like the basic shape of a turtle. When you go in to make the basic shape of a turtle, you should get that and just do your color changes. The color changes is where you might find there's more of a challenge, but if you play with it some, you'll get this. So for instance, it took me 3 tries to get the head. Now, as you'll notice, there's not tries for anything else. There's a reason for that. I used the tail of my bear, and I used the wider bottom of my elephant. I shrunk it down and used a much wider bottom, but instead of sewing a straight edge, I actually drawstringed it together and made a circular kind of edge. And the thing is to do the claws, I did basically a kind of picot stitch in the middle, which is kind of a technique that you might find on somebody else's pattern when loom knitting. I'm sure somebody else has done it, but it's basically a picot stitch. I've seen a picot cast on, a picot cast off, but this is basically a picot stitch, which is more of a crochet term in the middle of a work of loom knitting. And those are the claws, and yes, I sewed my arms on backwards, so my little thumb claws should be in, but this is a draft, so it's not really a big deal if it matches up or not. The body I used was also the elephant's, because it was short, and the ears I took from the rabbit. And the thing is if you sew your bluish purple edges together at the end there, it does very much like a fold over, and it tightens it up. And because you do it flat, your end where you go back the direction you came is a little shorter than this end, which allows a natural curve without there being too much in there. So my initial thing was the ears, and I did do them separately, but I didn't have to fold them. I just sewed them, so I didn't have to fold them on my original. On my body, I said I would do a tube but flat and add the tail like on the teddy bear. But there is a way of doing this color change without having to do it flat. And I am going to do a tutorial on how to make the purple alien. And I'll show you this technique. The problem is it's hard to keep up with your rows. But I'll tell you how to keep up with them when you're doing it. But I have a technique where you don't have to do it flat, but there's a special wrapping method that you have to do to make one side basically one color and the other side the other color without having to do it flat. So that's what I ended up doing there. And then for the arms, it says tube with flat rows used to complete the claws. So I think that meant to be short rows. Anyway, on my bigger one, I probably will do short rows, but I just did single ones for the smaller level. But I think I'm planning on doing 2 for when I go and double this for each claw, rather than doing just 1. And then for the legs, basically doing just like I did on the teddy bear. And this is basically the teddy bear too, but it depends on where you put those claws. If you put the claws in the area where you're going to decrease, it's going to fall right in center and give you that indentation right there. And I will tell you this right now, it was hard to find the yarn colors to match. So do the best you can. The easy colors are the ears and the chest and everything, but I'll tell you what, the body is difficult. But you can get a purple, you can get a blue, but it's an unusual color, I'll tell you that, and finding that color is not easy. So for overall, I did end up using an E-wrap and a wrap and turn, and the short row techniques, and bringing my original loop back for the claws and everything. So right now he's a small size because he's a draft. So at this point I want to go in on my written out pattern, which looks something like this. Pure scribble. And I want to go in and I want to double everything, and go in and write it down doubled and then make it up, and it should work. Now you'll notice what I did with the eyes is they look very much like the eyes that they use. And what I did was take my melted down pony bead and file it into place. And so don't forget, when you go in and try the tutorial on how to make your own eyes, don't hesitate to use a file. File the black circle into shape. Don't hesitate to do that. So that's pretty much your drafting and how you work it up, finding different patterns that exist that look like what you're after. And yes, I ended up using a lot of my own to figure this out, but you can use other people's. I just have a wide array of techniques that I use typically to create things, so I didn't have to go very far. But don't hesitate to use my patterns to find techniques and shapes that you like, because it's all about shaping, finding the shape you're looking for. And so go through patterns online of loom knitting and find the shape that you like. Figure out how they're creating the shape and then adjust it to the way you want it to look. And that's pretty much how you go about working up your draft. And once you work up your draft, then you can double everything and go to your next size up, which I'm going to do the 29 peg Cindywood loom, and it's going to be finer gauge. The only other thing that I might have considered doing was doing the eye area separate and sewing it in, but I don't think I will. I hate sewing extra pieces on, so if you don't mind sewing extra pieces on, then consider doing something like that, but I hate sewing extra pieces on, so I try to go about the easier route. So this is what your design page should look like. This is what your draft should eventually look like, something very close. And once that happens, adjust your actual pattern for the original. So at this point, you'll want to go to part 3 and actually see the tutorial on how it's made. And that's it.